The smell of garlic and rosemary filled our kitchen on November 3rd, 2024, when my entire world shattered with just 8 words. My name is Marlena, and I'm 32 years old. I never imagined that a simple Sunday dinner would become the night my father disowned me in front of my entire family. But before I tell you what happened that evening, you need to understand the woman I was before that moment, and the secrets that had been buried in our family for 27 years. The perfect daughter, growing up in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. I was what everyone called the golden child. My father, Richard Hawthorne, was a respected cardiac surgeon at Henry Ford Hospital. My mother, Patricia, volunteered at the local library and hosted elaborate dinner parties that were the talk of our neighborhood. My younger brother, Cameron, was the athletic star, and my younger sister, Vivian, was the artistic prodigy. And me? I was the responsible one, the straight A student who became a pediatric nurse, the daughter who called every Sunday, who never missed a family gathering, who organized my mother's surprise 60th birthday party down to the last detail. I did everything right. Or so I thought. The truth is, I spent 32 years trying to earn a love that I didn't know was conditional. I spent 3 decades walking on eggshells around my father's temper, around my mother's silent judgments, around the unspoken rules that governed the Hawthorne household. But that Sunday evening in early November, everything I thought I knew about my family, about myself, would explode like a pressure cooker left too long on the stove. The dinner that changed everything, it started like every other Sunday dinner. My father had requested his favorite meal, herb-crusted lamb chops with roasted vegetables and my grandmother's famous scalloped potatoes. I'd arrived at my parents' house at 2 p.m. to start preparations, just like I did every week. My mother was in the living room, pretending to read a book, but really watching me through the open doorway. Cameron and his wife Bethany were expected at 5. Vivian was driving up from Ann Arbor with her new boyfriend Marcus, someone none of us had met yet. The kitchen was my sanctuary. As I chopped carrots and parsnips, I felt that familiar sense of purpose. This was my role, the caretaker, the one who held everything together. I seasoned the lamb chops with precision, remembering exactly how my father liked them. Medium rare with just a hint of mint. At 4:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You need to tell them the truth, Marlena. If you don't, I will." My hands froze over the cutting board. The knife slipped, nicking my finger. A small bead of blood appeared, bright red against my pale skin. I stared at the message, my heart hammering against my rib cage. Who was this? What truth? But deep down, in that place where we hide the things we're most ashamed of, I knew exactly what this was about. The secret 6 months earlier, in April 2024, I had done something that went against everything my family stood for, something that would have made my father furious, my mother ashamed, and my siblings question whether they even knew me at all. I had hired a private investigator, not for anything sinister, at least, not at first. It started with a DNA test, one of those ancestry kits you can buy online. I'd been experiencing some health issues, severe migraines, unexplained joint pain, and my doctor suggested that knowing my complete family medical history might help identify any genetic conditions. The test was supposed to be simple. A bit of saliva, 6 to 8 weeks, and I'd get a breakdown of my ethnic background and maybe connect with some distant cousins. That's what the website promised. What I got instead was a bomb that would detonate my entire existence. According to the results, Richard Hawthorne, the man who raised me, who taught me to ride a bike, who walked me down the aisle at my wedding 4 years ago, was not my biological father. The investigation, at first, I thought it was a mistake. These tests aren't always accurate, right? But the more I researched, the more I realized that paternity results from these companies are actually highly reliable. Still, I couldn't accept it. I couldn't believe that my mother, Patricia Hawthorne, the woman who gave speeches about family values at church, who had been married to my father for 38 years, could have had an affair. So I did what any desperate person would do. I spent $3,000 I didn't have on a private investigator. Her name was Lorraine Chen, and she was recommended by a lawyer friend who handled divorce cases. Lorraine was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She met me at a coffee shop in Royal Oak on April 19, 2024. "I need to know who my biological father is," I told her, sliding the DNA results across the table. She studied them without expression. "This will require discretion. If your mother had an affair 32 years ago, there will be a trail, but it might be cold. Do you have any suspicions? Any family friends from that time?" I shook my head. "My parents' marriage has always seemed solid. I can't imagine my mother." Lorraine gave me a sad smile. "In my experience, Mrs. Hawthorne, people are rarely who we think they are. Give me 6 weeks." The truth surfaces. It took Lorraine exactly 5 weeks to piece together what my mother had hidden for over 3 decades. In September 1991, my mother had a brief affair with a man named Thomas Brennan. He was a visiting professor at the University of Michigan, teaching a semester-long course on American literature. My mother, who had been volunteering at the university library, met him during a book discussion group. According to Lorraine's investigation, the affair lasted exactly 8 weeks. It ended abruptly when Thomas's wife, Carolyn, discovered some letters and confronted him. Thomas immediately ended things with my mother and returned to his home in Boston. He never knew that my mother was pregnant. My mother, according to hospital records that Lorraine managed to access through questionable means, had suspected she might be pregnant in late November 1991. She was terrified. She and my father had been trying to conceive for 3 years with no success. My father had even undergone tests that suggested he had a low sperm count. When my mother discovered she was pregnant, she made a choice. She told my father it was a miracle, that their prayers had been answered. And Richard, desperate for a child, believed her without question. He never suspected that the baby, me, wasn't his. Thomas Brennan had no idea I existed. According to Lorraine's research, he was now 68 years old, retired from teaching, and living in Portland, Maine, with his wife of 45 years. They had 3 children of their own, my half-siblings. When Lorraine showed me a photograph of Thomas, I felt like I was looking at a female version of myself. We had the same dark eyes, the same prominent cheekbones, the same slightly crooked smile. "What are you going to do with this information?" Lorraine asked me at our final meeting on May 24th, 2024. "I don't know," I whispered, staring at the picture of a stranger who was, genetically, more my father than the man who raised me. The decision for 6 months, I kept the secret. I told no one, not my husband, Derek, not my best friend, Sophia, not even my therapist. The knowledge sat inside me like a stone, heavy and cold. I would look at my father during our Sunday dinners and wonder, should I tell him? Did he deserve to know that the daughter he loved wasn't biologically his? Would it destroy him? Would he hate me? And my mother, every time I saw her, I felt a surge of anger mixed with something else. Betrayal? Sympathy? I couldn't decide. She had lied for 32 years. She had built an entire family on a foundation of deception. But she had also given me a life. She had given Richard a child when he thought he couldn't have one. Was that love? Or was that selfishness? I went back and forth 1,000 times. Some days I decided I would never tell anyone. The truth would die with me. Other days, I was consumed with the need to confront my mother, to demand answers, to ask her how she could lie for so long. Then, on November 1st, 2024, I received an email that changed everything. It was from Thomas Brennan, the email. "Dear Marlena," it began, "you don't know me, but I believe I may be your biological father." I read those words 5 times before they made sense. Thomas explained that he had recently taken a DNA test at the urging of his grandson, who was researching the family genealogy. Through the DNA matching system, he had discovered a close genetic match to someone named Marlena Hawthorne. When he saw that I was born in August 1992, exactly 9 months after he left Michigan, he began to piece things together. He had hired his own investigator. He had confirmed that my mother was the Patricia Warren he had known briefly in 1991. Warren was her maiden name. He had even found an old photograph from a university event where they stood next to each other, my mother's hand resting on her stomach. A stomach that, according to the date stamp on the photo, would have contained me. "I am writing to you first," Thomas wrote, because I believe you deserve to know the truth before anyone else. I don't know what your mother told your father, or if you even know about me, but I felt it was important to reach out. I have no expectations and no demands. I simply wanted you to know that I exist, and that I would welcome the opportunity to know you, if you're interested. He included his phone number and email address. He also included a photograph of his family, his wife, his 3 children, his 5 grandchildren. They all looked happy, normal, unaware that their world was about to be complicated by the existence of an unknown daughter and sister. I spent November the 2nd crying. I spent November 3rd trying to figure out what to do, and then I made a decision that I would regret for the rest of my life. I decided to tell my family at Sunday dinner. The preparation on the morning of November 3rd, 2024, I woke up with a sense of determined calm. I would tell them, I would lay out the facts, show them the DNA results, explain about Thomas. I would give my mother a chance to explain herself, and then we would figure out how to move forward as a family. It seemed so simple in my head. I got to my parents' house at 2 p.m., just like always. My mother was in her usual spot in the living room. My father was in his study, reading medical journals. Everything was exactly as it had been for 32 years. I started cooking. I chopped vegetables, I seasoned the lamb, I peeled potatoes. My hands moved automatically, but my mind was racing. How would I start the conversation? Should I wait until after dinner? Should I ask to speak with my mother privately first? At 4:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with that threatening text. You need to tell them the truth, Marlena. If you don't, I will. I knew immediately who it was from. It had to be Thomas. Maybe he was getting impatient. Maybe he had decided that if I wasn't going to tell my family, he would do it himself. That text made my decision for me. I would tell them today, right now, before Thomas could do it for me. The guests arrive. Cameron and Bethany arrived at 5:10 p.m. Bethany, as usual, was dressed impeccably and carried a store-bought pie that she presented as if she'd baked it herself. Cameron immediately grabbed a beer and joined my father in the study. Vivienne and Marcus showed up at 5:35 p.m. Marcus was tall and nervous, clearly uncomfortable meeting the family for the first time. Vivienne looked radiant, more confident than I'd seen her in years. They were planning to announce their engagement at dinner, though Vivienne had told me in advance, swearing me to secrecy. Everything smells amazing, Vivienne said, hugging me in the kitchen. You've outdone yourself, I forced a smile. Thanks. I tried. My mother called everyone to the dining room at 6:00 p.m. sharp. This was her rule. Dinner was always served at 6, and everyone was expected to be seated and ready. The dining room looked beautiful, as it always did. Fine china, crystal glasses, fresh flowers in the center of the table. I brought out the first course, a simple salad with vinaigrette. Everyone chatted about their weeks. Marcus talked about his job in software development. Bethany complained about a difficult client. My father discussed a particularly challenging surgery. I barely heard any of it. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone must be able to hear it. The main course. When I brought out the lamb chops, my father smiled at me. Perfect as always, he said. What would we do without you, Marlena? That sentence, those simple, affectionate words, almost made me abandon my plan. What would they do without me? What would I do without them? But then I felt my phone buzz again in my pocket. Another text from Thomas. I'm giving you until 7 p.m. It was 6:23 p.m. I set down the serving platter with shaking hands. Before we eat, I said, my voice coming out stronger than I felt. There's something I need to tell everyone. The table went quiet. 6 pairs of eyes turned to me. My mother's face had gone very pale. She knew. Somehow she knew exactly what I was about to say. Marlena, she said quietly. Perhaps this isn't the time. I took a DNA test. I interrupted, looking at my father. 6 months ago, and I found out something that I think everyone deserves to know. My father frowned. A DNA test? Why would you? Richard Hawthorne is not my biological father. The words hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then Cameron laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. What are you talking about? Is this some kind of joke? It's not a joke. I pulled the folded DNA results from my pocket and placed them on the table. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to tell you, but it's true. Mom had an affair in 1991 with a man named Thomas Brennan. He's my biological father. The explosion. What happened next is burned into my memory with perfect, horrible clarity. My father stood up so fast his chair fell backward. His face had turned a deep, alarming red. Patricia, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Is this true? My mother was crying, silent tears streaming down her face. She didn't answer. Is this true? My father roared, slamming his hand on the table. The glasses jumped. The flowers fell over, water spreading across the white tablecloth. Richard, please. My mother started. Don't. He held up his hand. Don't you dare. 32 years. 32 years you let me believe. His voice broke. He looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Pure betrayal. You're not my daughter. Dad, I'm sorry. Stop calling me that. His voice was ice. I'm not your father. Thomas Brennan is your father. Maybe you should go live with him. Richard, please. My mother was sobbing now. Don't do this. She's still your daughter. You raised her. You love her. Loved, he corrected, his eyes still on me. Past tense. Vivian was crying. Cameron looked stunned, his face pale. Bethany was gripping her napkin, her knuckles white. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear. Dad, I tried again, my own tears starting to fall. I'm still me. I'm still the same person. The DNA doesn't change. Get out. His voice shook the room. Get out of my house. Get out of my life. You're not a Hawthorne. You're the product of your mother's lies and betrayal. You're not my daughter. You're nothing to me. Richard, no. My mother stood up. If you're going to punish someone, punish me. Marlena didn't do anything wrong. She kept this secret for 6 months, my father snarled. She investigated behind our backs. She chose to humiliate me in front of my entire family. She's exactly like you, Patricia, a liar and a betrayer. He turned back to me, and I'll never forget what he said next. While I was sitting here, thinking we were about to enjoy a nice family dinner, you were planning to destroy everything. You're no longer part of this family, Marlena. I want you out. Now. The aftermath, I stood there, frozen, unable to believe what was happening. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I thought there would be shock, yes, and anger. But I thought eventually we would talk. We would work through it. We were a family. But the man looking at me wasn't my father, not the father I knew. This was a stranger, cold and furious and completely unforgiving. I'll go, I whispered. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I walked out of the dining room, through the kitchen, past the meal I'd spent hours preparing. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the front door open. Behind me, I could hear my mother's sobs. My father's continued shouting. Vivian saying, Dad, please, this is crazy. I got in my car and sat there for a moment, staring at the house where I'd grown up. The lights were on in every window. It looked warm and welcoming, like the home I'd always known. But it wasn't my home anymore. I drove away at 6:47 p.m., 13 minutes. That's how long it took for my entire life to fall apart. The following days, the next week was a blur. Derek, my husband, was furious, not at me, but at my father. He had no right, Derek kept saying. You're his daughter? You've been his daughter for 32 years. Some DNA test doesn't change that, but it did change it, at least for my father. Cameron called me on November 4th. I don't know what to say, he admitted. Dad's not speaking to anyone. Mom's locked herself in their bedroom. This is insane. Vivian called crying on November 5th. He won't listen to reason, she said. I tried to tell him that you're still our sister, that family is more than genetics. But he just keeps saying you betrayed him. Maybe I did, I said quietly. No. Vivian's voice was fierce. You told the truth. That's not betrayal. But was it? Had telling the truth been the right thing to do? Or had I been selfish, prioritizing my own need for honesty over the stability of my family? The letter from my mother on November 10th, 1 week after the disastrous dinner, I received a letter from my mother. It was handwritten, 7 pages long, and it was the most honest thing she'd ever shared with me. She wrote about Thomas, about how she'd met him, how the affair had started, how guilty she'd felt. She wrote about the moment she realized she was pregnant, the terror and the joy mixed together. She wrote about the decision to tell my father it was his baby, how she'd convinced herself it was the right thing to do. I told myself it was a white lie, she wrote, that it didn't matter who the biological father was, because Richard would be your father in every way that mattered. And he was, Marlena. He loved you from the moment you were born. He stayed up with you when you had colic. He taught you to swim. He cried at your wedding. That love was real, even if it was based on a lie. I know what I did was wrong. I've known it for 32 years. Every day I lived with the guilt. Every time Richard talked about how you had his eyes or his stubbornness, I felt like a fraud. But I also saw how much he loved you, and I told myself that the lie was worth it. I never imagined you would find out. I never thought DNA tests would become so common, so accessible. When you told me 6 months ago that you were having health issues, I almost warned you not to take the test. But how could I do that without revealing the secret? I am so sorry, Marlena. I'm sorry for lying. I'm sorry for putting you in this position. And I'm sorry that my choices have cost you your father's love. Richard is devastated. He feels like our entire marriage has been a lie. He feels emasculated, betrayed, made a fool of. He's not wrong to feel those things, but he's wrong to take it out on you. You are innocent in all of this. You were a baby when this happened. You had no control over the circumstances of your birth. And for what it's worth, you are still my daughter. You will always be my daughter. Nothing can change that. I hope someday Richard will see that too. But right now, his pain is too fresh. His anger is too strong. Give him time. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Mom, I read that letter a dozen times. Each time I felt something different. Anger, sadness, understanding, confusion. My mother had made a terrible choice 32 years ago. But in her mind, she'd been giving my father the gift of fatherhood, something he desperately wanted and thought he couldn't have naturally. Was that love, or was that deception? I still don't know the answer.